Hello friends, welcome hip cats and groovy chicks. Welcome back to the Jazz Ranch. You know, people have asked me to talk about how to harmonize a melody. In other words, how do you get the chords underlying the melody that sound good? In other words, there's so many possibilities. How do you create the best one? Well, I'm going to be talking about that in this video and then using the song Moon River that was written by Henry Mancini and Johnny Mercer. I'm going to use that song. But I want to give you a quote first from Charlie Haydn, the great bass player. He said this, and he's talking about his students. He says, I want them to come away with discovering the music inside of them. And not thinking about themselves as jazz musicians, but thinking about themselves as good human beings, striving to be a great person, and maybe they'll become a great musician. So that's a great quote. I think he had his priorities right there. So now here we go with harmonizing, how to find the chords for a song. Here we go. So now we'll take the simplest song, and if you're trying to figure out what the chords should be, then you look at the melody and you see where the strong beats are. In other words, beat 1, of course. Like, let's just take Frere Jacques because that's as simple as you can get. So it's like, you see, so the first note is a chord tone, the second note is a passing tone, and the third note is a chord tone. Passing, chord tone, then chord tone, passing tone, chord tone. See, now where those chord tones hit, those are notes that fit a specific chord, and it's easy to see that those notes fit the C chord, major. Then again, see, passing, chord, passing, chord tone, then chord. Now there, that can be a C as well, but you can, probably you would go to G7. So you have the 1-5 chord in there. You'd have the C, mostly the C, and then the 5 on this. You see, so like simple tunes are easy to figure out as far as the chords because they'll outline it. Like, show you another one. Now suppose you have to figure out a tune, what the chord should be, and you only have the melody. Well, most of the time when you play a song, the chords are given to you. So like if it's a simple song, it just has 3 chords, then we're going to use the diatonic system, which is, so it's going to be C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, and then B diminished. We're going to use those chords that are based on the diatonic scale, and they'll fit in the melody. Now, there might be some alterations where the 3 chord might be altered to major, but to start out, there's hundreds of songs that are written in which we just use the root chord or the tonic chord, the C, the subdominant, the F, and the G dominant. And often we add the 7th to the G chord, so we have that dominant 7th there. So like an example might be Oh Susanna, 3 chords, right? 1 chord. Now there it goes to the 5. Back to the 1. There's the 5 again, so that's dominant chord to tonic. Now it goes to subdominant. Tonic, dominant, tonic, dominant. Very simple. There's hundreds of these songs that you can, if you just know those 3 chords and you can see how the melody fits. In other words, the chord tones are hitting on the strong beat, and so that gives you a clue as to what the chord should be. Now, you can substitute chords for other chords. In other words, we can substitute a 3 chord for a 1 chord, or a 2 chord for a 4 chord, or sometimes a 6 chord for a 1 chord. There's all types of substitutions, so we can elaborate on that. Now take that same melody and expand it with substitute chords. In other words, chords that substitute for those 3. Maybe there I'd go to the 6 chord. And I go to the 2 chord here and the 5. 6. The 2, 5, 1. Then the 4 chord. I might use the diminished chord, 5 chord there with a sus, 6, 2, 5, 1. So that's the 2-5-1s. Now I'm using more of the chords that are in the scale tone triads or seventh system, and I threw in one diminished chord just for fun. Now I want to show you these same principles of chord tones in the melody against the proper chord, but I want to show you what would be the wrong chords. In other words, using that system or that logic of making chord tones on the melody, but not using good theory or good understanding of theory, or what you might call, well, how would a jazz musician play this if they wanted to do something interesting with the chords. So here's an example now of a song, it's Moon River, playing the wrong chords but using the right kind of logic. Now, first note is, then it goes. Let's take it now like that could be a C chord, right? Then this could be a G chord, this could be an F chord, and this could be an E minor chord, and that could be a D minor there. So here's your first set of chords, and they don't sound bad, they're just not the right chords. That's how someone would play it that knows the melody but doesn't know anything about music. They would play it that way. You might have heard people play this way. No offense, but you know, even continuing the 6th chord now, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, 3 chord. You see, there's no beauty. I mean, you're taking a beautiful melody and you're destroying it with the wrong chords. Now you might be asking, well, what's wrong with those chords? They do fit the melody and they do sound correct. There's no dissonance in there. Well, the problem is they're not really going anywhere. There's no sense of the cycle of fifths, 2-5-1s, or any of that. In other words, there's no sense of the diatonic system and then maybe moving a 2-5 into another tonal center. You know, so I'm going to show you the Mancini changes, and I'm just going to keep it simple, but I want to show you how one chord leads to the next and the logic of the chord progression. So the first chord, of course, is C6 or 6-9. Then he goes to a 6th chord here. Now notice that the D note doesn't belong in the 6th chord, but it's not landing there, it's just starting there. The line is starting there, but it's landing on the C, so it's landing on the 3rd. And it's very common for a tune to go from the 1 chord to the 6th chord. So that's good theory involving chord progression, because it wants to lead, you know, the 1 chord wants to lead to the 6th chord very nicely, like this, right? And then it might even want to go to the 4. So in other words, the idea of these kind of lines, C, G with a B in the bass, A minor, C with a C and 7 with a G in the bass, F major, E minor, D minor, and then G7. See, that's a good progression that's descending. And then ascending might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with the G and the B in the bass here, or that'd be the 5 chord with the B in the bass. See, so that type of motion, the descending motion, stepwise, through the tonic key, I mean, you know, the C scale, and ascending through the C major scale are good moves, plus cycle of fifths, so like this kind of progression. C major to A minor, to D minor 7 to G7, to E minor 7 to A minor 7 to D minor 7 to G. That's a cycle of fifths. You want to review that if you don't understand this. But of course now Mancini took a wonderful melody and he put it to a wonderful set of chord changes. He could have started with the chord changes and maybe adjusted the melody one way or another, but that doesn't matter. In other words, you have to have a marriage between the chord changes, the chord progression, and the melody. And so you have to use some principles of theory, particularly 2-5-1s and good harmonic movement, you know, that I just showed you, stepwise, ascending or descending, or cycles. And of course now with Johnny Mercer writing the lyrics, now you have a perfect song, won the Academy Award. So let's look at it. First chord is C, of course. Now on the wrong changes version, I went to G here and then to F. Well, that's okay, but it isn't really that good. So like what he did was he went down stepwise like to the A minor, to the 6th chord, and put the D on the 6th chord. Now that's not, you could call that an appoggiatura. It's a passing tone in the A minor scale, a passing tone, but he goes immediately to a target tone on the 3rd, which is the strongest target tone you can get in terms of any chord, is the 3rd. So he goes, now you could put a diminished chord here if you like it, like that, make it more interesting, but don't need to. I don't think that he wrote it that way. I think he just, you know, like the tension, resolution, and then keeping the same idea, da da. So he's going da dee da da da. See, that logically falls into place, that note would be next. Now he could have just kept the same chord or made it a G7 like this. But that, no, what he did was he put an F chord there. Now this is beautiful because, so you think of that to dissonance, and it's right on the beat, so it's an appoggiatura, but it comes right off of it and resolves there on the 3rd. And then it goes, ending up on a target tone on the 3rd on the E minor. See, so he has a very logical progression going right down the scale. C, passing tone, A minor, passing tone, F major to E minor. So that's a strong set of chord changes or a chord progression for 4 measures that are going to enhance that melody and create some nice tension chords that resolve pretty quickly. Like this is tension, resolution, and then resolving there on a very strong note, the 3rd. But now, this is fascinating. He takes that melody, da, Moon River, wider than a mile. Then he goes, repeats that line, which reinforces the strength of that melodic line by repeating it. So some tension there, resolution. Now here, what does he do? He goes to the 7th chord of the system, of the C7. In other words, the B minor 7 flat 5. And then that's a 2 relating to a 5, taking you to A minor. So that's a 2-5 to A minor. So using that 2-5-1 concept, which is so strong in creating harmony beneath a melody, is the 2-5-1 concept. So now, the 2-5-1 concept can work on secondary dominants. In other words, it doesn't have to be just D minor 7, G7, C in the key of C. We can have the B diminished now, half diminished, B a 2, and then put a 5, which is E7, moving to the 6th chord, A minor. And that's what's happening here. And so, to A minor. Now, this is interesting, and I talked about stepwise motion. Next chord is a C chord, but with a G in the bass. I could stay there. No, but he's going to go to the F. So another ascending line. You know, he had this line first. Now he has the F to the E minor. Now to this B to E. Now the A minor from the 6th chord is going to move down. You can think of that as an A minor with the G in the bass descending, creating a nice bass line, or you can think of it as a C chord. To the F major there, works nicely. Now here's the thing that is signature sound for Mancini. He could have gone F minor there, but he goes to this B flat altered chord. So he creates a very hip sounding chord, like a B7 with a sharp 11, which takes him nicely down a half step to the A minor. Now this is tricky here. It goes to this half diminished chord on the F sharp. 2-5 to E minor, A7. Okay, now what that is he's using, keeping the melody diatonic, but now he's changing and using an altered chord, you know, be an F major chord, up a half step and then altered to half diminished, which creates a 2-5-1 into E minor, which is the 3 chord. You see, so like, the idea is that you can use a lot of interesting chords within a melody that is strictly diatonic. In other words, that melody never goes into any notes that are not in the C scale. But I can use any chromatic note and a chromatic chord, any root of any chromatic chord, and enhance that melody as long as it's logical. And he's using a cycle of fifths here. He's using F sharp to B, to E minor, to A, to D minor, to G7. You see, that progression now is a cycle of fifths. So that gives it strength, harmonic strength, is to have that cycle of fifths. Now you want to download my sheet on this on my website and look at it as I'm describing it. But how a jazz musician might take Mancini's version and his chord progression now and add things to it, harmonize it in a certain way, use tritone substitutes, that kind of thing. So first chord, and also voicings, how you voice the chord. First chord I'm going to voice that way with a 6 and a 9 in it. Then the next note I'm going to harmonize rather than just using it straight A minor. I'm going to use a diminished chord there. That's a typical diminished move, to go up a half step. And then this one, I'm going to voice that with a G chord here instead of an F chord. Instead of that, I'm going to use the G chord and then harmonize these notes. And that's using drop twos. Has a signature sound to it. Actually, it's suspended. There's fourths voicing. And then I'm using parallel motion here with fourth voicings. Another fourth chord there. And here's a tritone substitute. And I changed the melody a little bit here. Now I add the ninth in there, you see. And then this one is a tritone substitute. Half tone approach with the augmented fifth there. F major 9, I'm adding the ninth, and then here's the B flat sharp 11. You don't have to do anything with that, it's perfect. But then I put a tritone substitute here. Again, I'm going to harmonize these. That's the 13, half diminished, F sharp half diminished to B 13. There's your 13. There's your 13. There's your D minor 9. And then I use a D flat 9 there to approach. C6 9. A flat diminished, A minor. There's the G with the F stacked chord there. What's that sus sound? Oh, I got parallel motion. 6 chord. Here's the descending line. Substitute chord there. That's an E flat with a D flat in the bass. 3 chord sus, and then a diminished chord, and then another diminished chord. Approach, tritone substitute, and then that minor chord against the G, F minor, the major 7th. I always add something to any chord, like a 6 there. So now a good thing to try to do is to play a song and then try to play a new melody for that song, whatever it may be, and make it fit the chords nicely, the chord progression nicely, and then maybe improvise on it. Another good thing to do is to take a melody and just try to put a good chord progression to it. In other words, create a melody just out of your head and try to put a really good chord progression using those kind of movements that I talked about, those ascending stepwise movements. I didn't talk too much about diminished chords because I didn't have one in this particular song, but the diminished chords are a great way to get maneuver to, you know, up a half step or down. You know, like here's a F chord, G flat diminished, I'm sorry, A flat diminished, or G minor, or ascending, G minor, A flat diminished to an A minor. In other words, they can connect chords that are rising above the present chord or that are descending. They'll create the half-step harmonic approach. So we'll wrap up now. Signing off from the Jazz Ranch. Thanks so much for joining me this evening. And please leave a comment or a thumbs up. I love to hear from you. I always try to respond to all comments. Give me time. And until next time, I'll say in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, swing loose. And we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.